Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome to the Zoo Lab channel. Today, we're gonna be covering a lighting breakdown from a shoot a couple days ago where specifically we were shooting into windows. So that's the main goal and the main topic that I wanna tackle today so that you guys can have a better understanding of how to shoot into windows, how much exposure and light you need and level you need to bring in to compensate for those windows. Without further ado, let's jump into it. So before the shoot ever started, Dean and I went up to the location to do a little scout and to make sure that we understand where the lights are gonna go and how much light and level we need, and also camera positioning and where the angles are gonna be. So that was obviously the first task, was the location scout and making sure that we can dial it in before we ever hit record. So without going too far off the trail, location scouting is major and key to a successful shoot. Making sure that you at least have photos or videos of the location, but getting your eyes on the space is the best case scenario so you can really see how big or small the space is. Also, to assist in the pre-production planning after our location scout, I got home and jumped on Adobe Illustrator and used a set of elements called film set objects, which has been really helpful in some of our previous shoots. And I was able to accurately lay out the exact lighting diagram that I wanted for the shoot. And also it's helpful so the other crew members can see exactly how the lights are gonna be set up and kind of have a plan of action going into the shoot. Okay, so the start of this setup, obviously we needed to make sure that we expose for the windows. So once we locked in our camera position and also our camera settings, meaning we had our frame rate, 23.976, we had our shutter angle, 180 degree shutter angle. Those things aren't changing since that is what the project calls for. And also we locked in our aperture on all cameras before we ever set up lighting or anything like that so that we can make sure we expose correctly for the windows. And after that, then we start to expose for the windows using ND, neutral density filters that are built into the Panasonic EVAs. So once we dial in our exposure for the windows, that's when we can start compensating for our lighting. And the first big light that we had inside was an Aperture 600D, and that had a Fresnel lens on it. And we also had that on a cool little beaver board that Dean actually built with his own two hands. So we have been putting that thing to work in our shoots, and this one came in clutch for this one, so that we can have the 600D at a very, very low angle, almost on the floor, and the beaver board came in clutch with that one. So the 600D was basically our room tone ambient, room tone fill, so that we can get proper exposure for the windows. Because once we start to add ND and compensate for the windows, then the inside will start to look very, very dark. So adding that 600D into the ceiling, kind of bouncing and filling up the room, will start to counterbalance our exposure for the windows, bringing up the levels inside. And with that 600D, we ensured that we had all of our lights on the opposite side of camera so that we can maintain our shadow side. As you can see on my face in this talking head as well, we always like to have a shadow side to ensure that we have plenty of depth and interest in our character or subject's face. Next up, we had two Amaran F22 light mats that were boomed out. And we had these really basic boom arms that you can find on Amazon. I'll put the link to the gear that we used in the shoot in the description down below, including any and all of our favorite gear that we use on most shoots. Be sure to check that out in the description. But we basically had these boom arms that we got from Amazon, and I've talked about these in previous videos, but we've used these almost on every shoot. You know, obviously the Amaran F22s do not weigh really anything at all. They're very, very lightweight mats. And using something like a boom arm from Amazon will do just fine holding these lights out. So it really comes in handy because we don't have to, for most of our interview talking head setups, we don't have to bring in a Menace arm because these light mats don't weigh a whole lot. So it definitely speeds up our setup time and lessens the amount of people that we need to set up for this. And so we had two, as you can see in the diagram, we had two of those light mats making a V, and it was a little bit different from the diagram. They were basically on opposite sides. As you can see, we have the A cam smack dab in the middle of the two characters in the scene, and we had the boom arms really kind of just V'ing towards them. Basically, we cross keyed with those. So one light coming from camera side left was lighting the character on camera side right. So it was crossing and keying them in a perfect position for a 45-degree Rembrandt lighting that we love to do on most of our interview setups. So that was our key. We have our fill with the 600D, and then we also used tube lights, specifically the Nanlite Pavo tubes. They're the old version. They're like the first version. I know they have a second version out now, which I'll put the link in the description down below, because I totally recommend these lights. If you are in the Nanlite family, if you are already in the Aperture or Amaran family, then I'll put a link for the newer Amaran tube lights that they just dropped recently. But basically, we use these tube lights for a nice little edge hair light on each character, each subject in the frame. And also it was almost like a 3-for-1. We used it for an edge light and also used it for a little eye light for the person across the frame. So basically the placement of the tube lights were perfectly in position to give a nice edge for one person. And it was also pointing perfectly at the other person, giving them an eye light and also just a little bit of fill on that shadow side so it wasn't too lost in the shadows and we can still see detail in their face. So it was able to do 3 things for us just with that perfect placement of it. So sometimes it's not all about bringing tons of lights out, but thinking of ways so that your lights can almost do 3 jobs or 2 jobs at once. It saves space on the set and also time setting up. And so that's what we used our tube lights for. And as you can see in this shot, I love using tube lights in the frame. Sometimes they just add that extra element of interest. But for this shoot, we didn't put it in the frame, but it was definitely making a big difference in our frame. And the next light that we use to give us that next bit of texture, and something that we use basically on every shoot, and I can't wait to drop a review on this one, so be sure to hit that notifications bell so you don't miss the review on this. But we used a Amaran 200X, and we used a Godox spotlight attachment with the Venetian blinds gobo inside to give us a nice realistic texture on the background. I believe it was only seen in one of the angles, maybe cam B, but it really made a huge difference, and it always does. That's why we always use it on basically every shoot. And so we dialed that in so that it was looking really crispy and naturalistic, almost like the sun was coming through that window exactly at that perfect time, the whole time, giving us that textured window blind effect on the wall. So we love using the Godox spotlight on almost every shoot. And that's literally it for lighting, guys. We had a wall of neg behind all of the cams. I believe we had about 2 or 3 sheets of 8x8 Duvetine kind of wrapping around behind all 3 of the cameras. That was giving us some nice control over our lighting so that everything wasn't spilling or bouncing around and taking away any shadows. So we made sure that we ensured the shadow side and controlled our light. And again, I always say this in every one of our videos, that controlling light is key, and ensuring that we maintain our shadow side so that light wasn't just spilling all over the place. And that's basically the lighting breakdown. As you can see in the finished product, we were able to pull off an incredible look, and it's definitely due to all of the elements coming together. Not just lighting, not just cool cameras, and not just great audio or a great location. All of those elements have to come together so you can see in the final image we have a great look, because first we were able to establish a great placement for our cameras, giving us the greatest amount of depth shooting into the L of the room or the corner of the room, and also utilizing what our location already had in place. As you can see, they had these awesome mirrors on the wall, and also was cool that it was symmetrical to the windows in the back with that arch shape. So it was a really cool touch to our image and to our shot. But once we did our location scout, we saw that corner and we wanted to shoot there. So we took videos with our phone. I checked out the Sun Surveyor app so that we can make sure we weren't competing with the sun. So basically what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the Sun Surveyor app on Location Scout, especially for a shoot, where we are pointing our cameras into the windows, I want to make sure that the sun isn't behind us directly shooting into our background that is behind the windows. Because if you think about it, we are trying to expose for the windows, and imagine the sun, right? Like a really, really bright light pointing into and lighting up all the trees and the houses behind that window. You can imagine how difficult and nearly impossible it will be to perfectly expose for those windows. So we want to make sure that we're not shooting into a position where, especially shooting into windows, we want to make sure that the sun isn't lighting up our background. So I hope you guys liked this lighting breakdown. Again, I'll drop all of the links in the description down below that I mentioned in this video, including the film set objects that we use to create our lighting breakdown, the Sun Surveyor app, so you can download that today to use in your location scouts, and all of the amazing pieces of gear that we were able to use for our interview setup. Appreciate you guys watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also hit that notifications bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. We appreciate you guys a ton, and we'll see you in the next one.